Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at speaking and listening. Now this is our 5th lesson in our 16 lesson series, taking a look at all aspects of functional skills. So each week we'll be adding a new video, so if you haven't done so already, please can you like and subscribe because it really does help us out when you do so. So the first thing we're going to think about is just testing your knowledge and your understanding of functional skills so far. So what I'd like you to do is just look at the statements and identify which ones you believe are true and which are false. So firstly then, we've got, it's okay to go on your phone while someone else is speaking. You only get one attempt at the speaking and listening assessment. You need to worry about your group and your own presentation only. Speaking and listening is just as important as the reading and writing assessments. And finally, you're allowed to use colloquial language, which means slang, in your presentation. So when you're thinking about those as well, try and stretch and challenge yourself and think about how can you show someone that you're actively listening to them, either when they're giving their presentation or when you're having your group discussion. Now, if you want to spend a minute going through those questions and think about them in a bit more depth, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead to the next part of the video. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So on the left hand side then we have all our true statements, and on the right hand side we have the ones that are incorrect. So first of all then, if we think about the true statements, so speaking and listening is just as important as the reading and writing assessments. So you'll know if you've been through your course for a few weeks now that there are 3 main assessments you need to do. Each one of them are equally weighted. You need all of them in order to actually pass the qualification. The second one is you're allowed to use colloquial language or slang in your presentation. Now, a lot of the time people tend to veer away from using slang or colloquialisms because it doesn't seem to be very formal, and that's a good instinct to follow. However, you are allowed to use it if you're having a conversational kind of tone or if you're in that kind of setting as well. So if you're actually having a presentation, for example, colloquial language is a great thing to use to actually help bring people together and to help to relate to people that you're trying to communicate with. You may not, however, want to use that in a more formal setting, such as a job or a workplace environment. So for our false statements then, it's okay to go on your phone while someone else is speaking. Now this is obviously something that is wrong, right? We shouldn't be doing it. It's just basic courtesy and politeness that we need to follow. But you'd be surprised the amount of people that kind of forget to do it. A lot of the time with our phones as well, it is a bit of a habit. So people do get in the habit of actually checking it as well. If you are doing your actual group presentation as well, even if you've wrote down your notes on your mobile phone, I try and avoid doing something like that because from anyone on the outside perspective, it looks like you're not paying attention to whoever's speaking at the time. And the final one, you only get one attempt at the speaking and listening assessment. You get several attempts if you need several attempts. Hopefully everyone gets it done in the first try, but we can understand sometimes that nerves play a factor as well. By the end of the lesson, you'll be able to recall what is expected from you in the speaking and listening assessment, understand how to conduct the presentations effectively, and finally, apply your understanding to begin planning for your assessment. So the first thing to focus on is then, what are the fundamental skills needed for speaking and listening? So what I'd like you to do, if you're in a group at the moment or if you're in a class, try and think, pair and share. Try and come up with as many things you think that you'd need to include in order to pass speaking and listening. If you're on your own, just pause the video for a moment and start thinking about what kind of things are actually indicative or typical of a good conversation. What kind of things actually tell you that someone is listening and paying attention and actually engaged in what you're trying to communicate. Class feedback. Check your understanding against the teacher's ideas. So first of all then, one of the big things in the success criteria that I think about is, can you communicate in a clear and polite manner? First and foremost, can people actually understand what you're trying to communicate? And are you coming across in a very polite and understanding way? A lot of the time if we come across being angry or aggressive, then people generally don't really take on board what you're trying to say. Are you using positive body language to show you are listening? Now there are a number of ways that we could do this. A lot of the time when people speak, for example, they will make eye contact with people, so you can do simple things like nodding, smiling, and just avoiding things like actually making sure that your arms aren't crossed, which is often considered to be like quite negative as you're being closed off to the rest of the world. Thirdly, we have do you have a clear line of argument? What we mean by that is, are you actually making sense, or are you making up on the spot? So are you just going off in every which direction and going off on a mad tangent that has nothing to do with the original argument, or does it have a clear structure throughout your actual speech? Next we have adapt your tone to suit the needs of the audience. And what we mean by this is that we're all different. Can you actually take on board who your audience is, and can you explain things in a way that would make sense to them? So for example, if you're doing an individual presentation and you're doing a presentation about being a mother or about being a father, and you're doing it to a bunch of teenagers, the likelihood is that you might need to explain certain things and certain aspects of it that they might not yet understand. So it's about, can you actually break down the information so that the audience is more receptive to what you're saying? Next we have respond effectively to feedback and questions. So if you're doing a presentation, there will be a time when you will ask, does anybody have any questions, anything they'd like to ask about my topic? And you'll be tested on your ability to actually listen carefully to other people and then to respond appropriately to what they've asked. And then finally, we've got contribute to the overall discussion, building on the ideas of your peers. So this really is more about the group discussion. Can you actually make sure that you're involved in the discussion, and can you actually join in and make sure that you're building upon their ideas and actually learning from what's going on in the conversation? Look at the table and fill in as many boxes as you possibly can. So here are some of the key terms that we're going to be going through while we're doing your speaking and listening assessment. Now, an important thing to be aware of is always remember to look back at some of these key terms when you're planning for your presentation and also for your discussion. Now, if you haven't heard of any of those, that's fine. You can see for colloquial language, I've marked down never heard of. So just go through the key terms and decide which ones you've either never heard of, the ones that you have some understanding. If you can, try and write your own definition, maybe you are aware of it already, and then if you can stretch yourself even further, think about how important you think it is. Now if you can't do much of this at the moment, don't worry too much, we'll fill it in as we go along, and if you want full access to this document, please click on the link that's available in the description as well. So we've got colloquial language, which we're going to be going over in just a moment. We've got coherent narrative, spontaneous communication, prepared communication, and then finally the line of argument. Okay, so if you want to have a go at that, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead to the next part and start having a look at colloquial language. So first of all then, what is colloquial language and what impact does it have on my communication? Now this is actually something I speak about quite a bit within our videos, so if you haven't heard of it before, you can always check out the other ones as well. So first of all, what is colloquial language? So this is a form of informal communication which is not often seen as appropriate to be used in a more professional setting. It is often something that is used between friends and family rather than interviews in a work setting. So how does it actually impact our communication? So colloquial language can have two major impacts on how we communicate. Firstly, it can help us to build relationships. If you speak to someone informally, this often creates a friendly tone and may make you seem more personable. Often when we use these kind of words, they often make us seem like we're actually trying to be more friendly rather than actually having kind of a formal barrier between another person. Secondly, it can also have a negative effect. So if you use this in a formal setting, people may think that you're unprofessional and potentially that you're not very intelligent. So the thought behind that is that they're not using the most sophisticated words, and maybe they're not the most appropriate words for the kind of setting that they're in. So last thing before we move on, did you know colloquial language actually comes from the Latin meaning for speaking together? So when we think about doing our discussion and things like that, it is a good thing that it's actually used, because that's kind of the intended form of the language really. It's something that's supposed to be used when we're in groups, when we're forming relationships, and when we're with our friends and our family. Look through the worksheet, and for each sentence, identify where the writer has used colloquial language. So again, if you want full access to this, you can click the link below. Alternatively, we'll go through it all on the video now. So we're going to have 10 questions, and for each of these questions, you need to think about where's the writer used colloquial language. If you can stretch yourself as well, think about which words or which kind of language you would think might be inappropriate to actually use within a formal or informal setting. So number 1, hi mate, have you heard all about this drama celebrities are getting into about being cancelled online? So have a look through the sentence and decide which words or just word that might actually be classed as colloquial or informal language. Number 2, I was watching the telly the other night and the food they were cooking on the show looked banging. Number 3, I was watching the footy the other night, I don't know what the ref was thinking. Number 4, I ain't going to the cinema tonight, I want to watch something at home instead. And number 5, I was gobsmacked when I heard the news, he is one lucky fella. So take your time and go through these. Now we're going to have a look at the next 5, so if you're not too sure, please do pause it and take your time to go through them at your own pace. Okay, number 6, I can't get much from the canteen, I only have a fiver. Number 7, I can't wait to get home, I am just knackered. Number 8, my stomach is feeling a bit dodgy, I need to go to the loo. Number 9, I can't wait for payday, I am absolutely skint. And number 10, the last one, I hate seeing couples kiss in public, it's gross seeing someone snog out in the open. So as you look through each of these, try and identify which words that may be considered inappropriate in English, and mainly focus on the ones that you would consider to be colloquial language. And really think about each one of these examples really. Is there any you'd avoid actually using? There's often quite a personal relationship with words. There's a few words there that I personally wouldn't use in a formal or informal setting. So have a think about how you actually reacted when you heard a few of those words, and decide if any of them might be deemed inappropriate in English at all. As feedback, check your answers against the ones below. So for number 1 then, it was, hi mate, have you heard about all the drama celebrities are getting into about being cancelled online? Okay, so hi, first of all, is colloquial for hello, and mate would be inappropriate, whereas mate is colloquial. So this is where we have a bit of confusion generally. So what they're actually getting confused of here is the difference between colloquial language and the kind of language we use when someone sends like a text message or something like that. So in a text message you might say mate as in M8, but in English, even if you are speaking informally, I'd much rather you say mate as in M-A-T-E rather than M with the number 8. Even though it's still quite informal, I think it's trying to be a little bit more on the side of English rather than using all the text speak and things like that. Number 2, so that was quite an interesting one there. A lot of the time we don't actually think about these as being colloquial because we use them in everyday language all the time. So I was watching telly the other night and the food they were cooking on the show looked banging. So telly is obviously short for television, so that in fact would be colloquial language, and banging, the way it's been used there is slightly different because that is generally used by a lot of young people these days to say something is really good, but obviously it just means a verb in normal English to make a large noise or a bang. Okay, number 3, so I was watching the footy the other night, I don't know what the ref was thinking. So the key words there would be footy, dunno, and ref. Number 4, I ain't gonna go to the cinema tonight, I want to watch something at home instead. So the first word is ain't. Anything really that's using an apostrophe to miss out a letter is often considered to be more informal, and wanna is also colloquial as well because it's short for want to, or colloquial for want to as well. Okay, so now number 5 then. I was gobsmacked when I heard the news, here's one lucky fella. So there's 2 examples of colloquial language there. The first is gobsmacked, which means to show great surprise, and fella means a person or a man or something like that. Okay, moving on to number 6 now then. I can't get much from the canteen, I only have a fiver. So this is just a typical use of colloquial language when they mean £5. And then we've got number 7. I can't wait to get home, I'm just knackered. So you've got can't because it's using the apostrophe to miss out the letter, and also the word knackered. Now this is often a word that a lot of people deem to be inappropriate. It's not one that often gets used because it's got quite negative connotations. It often is associated with something broken, run down, something very negative generally as well. Okay, number 8, my stomach is feeling a bit dodgy. I need to go to the loo. So we've got the word dodgy and loo. And loo is short for toilet, or a colloquial for toilet anyway. Okay, number 9, moving on to that one. So I can't wait for payday, I'm absolutely skint. So can't, because you've got the apostrophe, missed out the letter, and skint. It's a very kind of old-fashioned British colloquial word, which means that they don't have any money, that they're just really feeling quite poor and hard done by generally. Okay, number 10, last one. I hate seeing couples kissing in public. It's gross seeing someone snog out in the open. And the colloquials there is snog and gross. Gross meaning something horrible and grotesque, and snog is just a colloquial word for someone kissing. So check your answers then. If you're not too sure, do have a look back at the questions as well and try them again. These are all kind of interesting words and very typical words that you might hear in everyday language, so hopefully we're familiar with them by now as well. So in terms of our next lesson then, this is what we're going to focus on. So we're going to make sure that we understand how to conduct a discussion. Now I've already looked at the colloquial language and how that's used. Now we're going to think about how you can use it in the actual discussion as well. We're going to learn how to plan for the assessment, so both for the actual discussion and as well for the individual presentation. And also we're going to evaluate the key skills needed to be successful. So the same skills that we looked at before, we're going to go through them, understand what each of them mean, and how important they actually are for our speaking and listening. If you need any additional support or help, the new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, leave us a comment below or visit our partner channel Bookworm Teaching for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks ever so much for listening, guys, and all the best with your work and revision in the future. Bye bye.